critically acclaimed Starfield released just over a year ago now, and gamers have been waiting with bated breath to see what Bethesda would cook up next. Well, we've finally gotten what we've all been waiting for. We've gotten the first story expansion for Starfield, Shattered Space. It's released, it's out, and no one cares. No one cares at all. No one's really talking about it. There's not many people even getting upset or angry at Bethesda because they've dropped the ball yet again. It's just apathy. People have just totally lost interest, not just in Starfield, I think, but Bethesda overall, because there has been. They used to be RPG leader, a bit like BioWare, where they had that respect, people cared, and now people can see shell of their former selves. People have moved on to other games, other series, other developers who make titles unlike Bethesda that don't feel like they were made a decade ago on a 25-plus-year-old engine that really shows its age. Gamers have pretty much decided that if Bethesda release anything or talk about anything that isn't Elder Scrolls 6, we don't care. Elder Scrolls 6 is the last chance where it's either it's bad and we can forget about you forever, go away, or maybe they redeem themselves in some fashion and they slowly crawl their way back. But it's a big if. Most people very skeptical, probably thinking Bethesda are past it, but maybe we'll have a look at Elder Scrolls 6. That's about it. So given that no one really cares about Bethesda anymore, people can't even really be stuffed getting angry or upset at them, I'm going to fill the void. I'm going to talk about the response to Shattered Space, because as we can see here on Steam, a bit of a mixed response. There was all this talk about how Shattered Space was going to be the redemption. There were the mixed feelings to the Starfield launch. It was missing this, it was missing that, a million loading screens, and you could venture the entire galaxy, jumping from planet to planet, exploring space, and what you'd learn is that the Starfield universe is very, very small, because even if you explore 1,000 planets, there's only like 10 of the same outpost, exactly the same, with the exact same notes in them. Even little caves, you go in the same dead body with the same note on them. Very small world, it seems. Even though Todd Howard did his thing and said, oh, it's going to be 10 times the size of Fallout 4, 15 times Skyrim, huge landmass. Even though it's technically very large, it feels smaller than Morrowind, which came out over 20 years ago. So that was the Starfield experience. And Shattered Space was apparently going to fix all that. They talked about doing all these patches. We're going to get hard at work. The fans, the copers, they said, oh, the modders are going to fix everything. The modders. And what have the modders actually done? Well, I think I saw a Stormtrooper mod. You can have a Stormtrooper in the game in Starfield. Hooray, it's all saved. That fixes all the issues. Again, procedural generation, the same shit over and over again. The loading screens, the mindless, boring NPCs. So mods were never really saving this thing, because why would they? Why would modders spend their time on something that no one's playing? Skyrim has better player numbers. Fallout 4 probably does as well. People have given up on this. And again, evidenced by the Steam reviews for Shattered Space. They're sitting right now at 44%, which is about what the base game deserves. I think the base game has fluctuated around 50, 60%, but certainly mixed. And I've said this a few times, that on Steam, your game has to be particularly bad to get less than, like, very positive reviews. A lot of people are quite generous with their positive reviews. People will often leave a review and it'll say, the game crashed 6 times, I couldn't make any progress, had to upgrade my whole computer despite exceeding the spec requirements, because these days games are never optimized properly on PC. Lost my save file at 30 hours in because the incompetent developers didn't fix a glitch. And they'll still give the game a thumbs up. People are very generous with Steam reviews. Despite that, Starfield, very harsh, mixed reviews. And there's only 500 of them. It suggests not many people have bought this yet, or have at least played it. And the thing is, I would bet that most people who even give Shattered Space a try, most people already own it. I highly doubt there are many people purchasing this. Because anyone who bought the standard edition and didn't get the upgrade like idiots like me did who bought the big edition, the space edition or whatever it was called, where you got Shattered Space. You had to pay more money to get friggin' early access. Imagine that, racing to play Starfield early. That's what we did, and we just got disappointed earlier than everyone else. But anyone who just bought the standard, played through, they probably got bored after a dozen hours, and they've never gone back to the game. That seems to be the common story. People gave it a try, they didn't give up immediately. They bought into the Todd Howard propaganda of, oh, if you just keep playing, you hit that 60-hour mark, that's the sweet spot when you start having fun. And they realized that was never coming. The fun never comes, and they gave up after 12, 18 hours, and they just moved on. They're never coming back to Shattered Space, despite the promises of it apparently, it's going to fix the game, it's going to solve all the deep-seated problems, like, again, procedural generation. The game is just a mess from its very foundation. You can't really fix it. They would have to start again, basically. But despite people claiming Shattered Space could be where it all comes together, clearly that hasn't happened. No one's talking about it all, not really positively or negatively, which just suggests that it's probably okay, probably a bit like some of the older Bethesda DLCs that were decent, kind of more of the same, but they're not going to fundamentally change the whole experience. If the base game sucks, you're probably not going to get much more out of Shattered Space, and that's what a lot of the reviews say anyway. Someone did leave a somewhat positive review. Unfortunately, many of the reviews here are not related to the DLC. I will give my take on Shattered Space, not Starfield, and the person rambles on, but at the end of it, they do say, overall, I'm positive on the DLC, albeit in a wait for a sale kind of way. Well, it doesn't sound like it's really worth it then if you're saying wait for a sale. And that is worth mentioning because the DLC, it's $50 in my currency. So probably like $30 or something American, which is insane. Like, this is half the cost of the base game, and if their plan was to maybe win people back who played the original, got bored very quickly and disappeared, if they were trying to get them back on board, convince them they fixed things, $50, no one who was disappointed the first time is going to pay that sort of money. And seeing this made me think about their business model, because my first thought was maybe they created this not even really to sell. They didn't expect anyone to buy it, but they had to make it because of, again, people like me who bought the deluxe edition and they'd already purchased it. They purchased in advance, so they had to deliver Shattered Space. There could be some truth to that, given the fact that apparently it's not very lengthy. So if we look at some of the reviews that, not like this positive one sucking up Bethesda's ass, we look at some other ones like this that said, wow, this shit was ass, boring story, boring characters, sounds a little bit like base game Starfield. Nothing cool happened, and apparently it was like 3 hours, 4 hours, and again, $50 for a friggin' 3-hour experience. Classic greedy Bethesda from the Fallout 76 days when it comes to value, but I'm not sure if it was really just that, having to want to pre-orders, because the other thing is, remember that Starfield was apparently going to be Xbox's golden chalice when it came to increasing Game Pass subscriptions, probably on the Xbox console, but also on PC, where they've tried to make some inroads. They've gotten nowhere. No one really cares about PC Game Pass. There's probably more people gaming on the Epic Store, Fortnite aside, but part of the reason for these expensive price tags on DLC, I think it's just because Xbox have lost so much money on people maybe subbing for 1 month to play Starfield, and then because it was hopeless, there was no reason to keep playing, they unsub immediately, meaning they play a brand new game for like 10, 15 bucks, which destroys Xbox's revenue. They lose all the box sales that they might have got from people who bought into the hype and bought it day one like me. So their plan may have just been expensive DLC to make up for all that money that we lost, but that plan clearly falls flat when no one's talking about the DLC and no one's playing it. Very few reviews and certainly very few players as well. For instance, someone here has compared who's playing Skyrim with Starfield. Surprise, surprise, yet again, more people are interested in Skyrim, 15-year-old game, despite all that talk about Starfield being the next 10-year project for Bethesda. I think Todd Howard said there was going to be yearly expansions for Starfield. I don't think that's going to happen unless they are actually that deluded to think anyone cares, which they may be. There are some signs, the Bethesda team, it's a big echo chamber. They don't really take feedback well. There was all the old rumors and things about them being angry at Obsidian for making Fallout New Vegas that was better than their version of Fallout and so on. So they may just be deluded. But if we look at these numbers, there's probably 11k people playing the Starfield DLC right now versus the 13k for Skyrim. And the truth is, if it was just like a random game, a random DLC, those numbers wouldn't be too bad. Like, there's not many DLCs that get people truly excited. Maybe something like Phantom Liberty for Cyberpunk that felt like a proper expansion, really expanded on things, but normally 11k to get people back for a little DLC wouldn't matter too much. But the whole thing with Starfield was all that talk about it's gonna be a decade-long game that people play for years and years to come. We want to fix it, we want to add all these features, the buggy that they were hyping up, and I mean, does the buggy really change that much? I've seen some videos of people going into cities, running everyone down, because as usual, Bethesda add a feature and it kind of breaks the game. It's half-assed in its implementation, and the truth is, these little quality of life features that they add, they're okay, they're nice, but the real problems were at the conception of Starfield, the procedural generation and so on. They just shouldn't have made this game. Starfield should have been a handful of planets. Each of them is like an individual Skyrim, handcrafted locations, interesting exploration. They just totally fumbled that. They lost sight of their strengths, and they just blew it. So again, these player numbers, they're not like Concord numbers, it's not total disaster, but no one really cares. People are just going to continue to forget about Starfield, and the idea that they're going to do a yearly expansion, why would you bother? Like, no one, I don't think even Starfield fans really want you to do that if they thought that it would take resources away from Elder Scrolls 6. You just need to make it, make number 6, revive the Elder Scrolls, and it is so sad that that series has laid dormant, basically been sacrificed so we could get Starfield, that there was apparently something so special about this idea of what they call NASA punk. That's how they describe Starfield, because it's not really sort of deep sci-fi or anything. NASA punk, which basically just means boring. That's all I can kind of translate to. The most boring space universe ever. Elder Scrolls, at least single player, has been dead for what will be like 20 years because of Starfield. Great. And even the Reddit, like the Starfield Reddits, like they're barely able to generate any enthusiasm. Instead of like really pushing how great this expansion is and how it's saving the game, they're basically just complaining about people complaining. So a top thread here, the hatred for shattered space, it's unfair. How can people be doing this? And there's a thread here saying there is a surprisingly lukewarm reaction to Shattered Space, mentioning the mixed Steam reviews. The top comment, kind of interesting, it mentions there's no new ship parts, which is surprising because the only feature that, like, again, the copers, people trying to find something about Starfield to like, they kept mentioning the ship building. Oh, it's exciting. You can build a ship to do absolutely nothing with, given that space flight is basically just an empty screen. It feels like you're on an elevator or something. You can't actually do anything. But apparently shipbuilding's super exciting. Despite that, they didn't bother to add any new ship parts in their big expansion, their big DLC. People talk here about how they might release a separate DLC that only has ship parts, which I think Bethesda have done before in like Fallout 4. I think there were DLCs that were basically just for the base building. And I could see them doing it because, again, Shattered Space, they had to give that to people who bought the Starfield Deluxe Edition, essentially working for nothing to develop a DLC for all those people. Again, I bet most people who play Shattered Space, they already bought it a year ago, meaning that Bethesda's making no new revenue off them. So that would make sense that they'll do a new DLC, charge people money for that, scummy as possible, just for ship parts. And then I don't even know if they'll do anything else. I don't think the yearly expansions are really going to happen. Maybe they'll do another DLC or something to save face, not totally give up. But I don't think anything's going to be happening with Starfield. I think after Starfield clearly underperformed, even if people argue, oh no, like the sales numbers are fine, they were breaking records, it clearly didn't help Xbox Game Pass, which is something that Microsoft were really pushing for. It seems like their plans all changed because Starfield didn't move the needle. Now they're putting games on PS5 and so on. So I think there's some pressure on Bethesda to basically be an Elder Scrolls Fallout factory. I don't think anyone's going to be greenlighting years and years of Starfield expansions, even though that might make Todd Howard quite sad. This was his pet project. Thought it was going to be the next big thing, and sadly, it failed miserably. It flopped. Even if you could argue that the player numbers at launch were very good, I think this DLC shows the great launch numbers. It was based off reputation alone, and now we've seen the game just sucked. No one was interested. That's why no one's interested in the DLC. Anyway, I thought I'd talk about this because I used to enjoy making fun of Starfield, and I thought this might be the last chance. I think the IP's pretty much just going to wither and die from here. I don't think we're going to be hearing much more from the series. I think it's pretty much going to be dead, but I'll leave it there. Cheers.